Ruan Mei is our strongest duo DPS support bar none. Her value as a hypercarry support is also not to be underestimated, packing 5 different kind of buffs. Simply put, she is one of the few units that have a 10 out of 10 pull value. 流水的主C，铁打的辅助。DPS are temporary while supports are forever. Hey guys, MrPokke here. Back with another video, and today we'll be going through the CN unit analysis for Ruan Mei. This guy will go through a general kit, eidolons, energy thresholds, relics, lightcones, and team compositions. Now, due to Ruan Mei's highly fluid and diverse team comps, the greater details will be explained in a separate video. And with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into today's content. So starting off first with her character kit. Her basic attack, nothing much to explain. 30 toughness bar damage, which increases to 45 toughness damage due to her skill below, which is when after using a skill, Ruan Mei gains overtone lasting 3 turns, decreasing by 1 at the start of a turn. During this duration, all allies damage is increased by 32% and weakness break efficiency by 50%. The team-wide 32 damage speed buff is not super significant. The real winner here is the 50% weakness break efficiency. This allows our team to break targets faster in scenarios we previously could not achieve within the same motion value. So for example, a damaging ultimate now can deal 135 toughness bar damage instead of 90 toughness damage, which is almost the same as 1 ultimate and 1 skill, equivalent to 150. Now, since this effect is applied to not only our DPS but for our entire team, including Ruan Mei herself, our team will theoretically receive less damage due to faster weakness breaks as well as the extended weakness breaks. One thing to note is that the counter, it decreases at the start of Ruan Mei's turn, meaning that Ruan Mei will lose the field by her 3rd turn after cast. This is exactly the same as Fu Xuan's skill. If players cannot achieve a 3-turn rotation, that is to say skill basic, they will have to cast the skill after 2 basic attacks in order to maintain the skill's uptime, which may slightly affect our skill point economy. Next, for Ruan Mei's ultimate, she deploys a field the last 2 turns, decreasing 1 at the start of the turn, exactly the same as her skill. Within this field, all allies, all type rest penetration increase by 25% and all attacks apply Thanatoblum Rebloom. I hope I didn't butcher the name. So when these enemies attempt to recover from a weakness break, as you can see from this flower marked on top of monkey over here, Thanatoblum Rebloom is triggered, which extends the duration, delaying the action by an amount equivalent to 20% of Ruan Mei's break effect plus 10% and dealing break damage equivalent to 50% of Ruan Mei's ice damage. Enemy targets cannot have Thanatoblum Rebloom reapplied to them until we recover. So at the bottom line is, this is one of Ruan Mei's strongest abilities, which is to say it extends the duration of an enemy within their weakness broken state. Now, in case you guys didn't know, enemies within this weakness broken state, they will take an additional 10% damage from all sources due to the toughness multiplier as seen from the damage formula. But the second point I want to bring you guys attention to is the mighty rest penetration. Now, as per the damage formula, rest itself is an entirely separate multiplier from attack, damage, and crit, which is similar to defense multiplier and vulnerability multiplier. So that being said, the effect of rest penetration, it will gain more benefits against enemies with higher rest and lower benefits for enemies with lower rest. So to understand this exactly, I've drafted up this little Excel table over here to help you guys visualize exactly how much additional damage Ruan Mei's 25% rest penetration provides. So for an enemy with absolutely 0 rest, it is a flat out 25% damage increase. If your damage initially dealt 1000 damage, now deal 1250 damage with Ruan Mei. But if your enemy has 50 rest, I mean currently right now we only have 40 rest enemies, but assuming that the enemy has 50 rest, your initial damage of 500 will now deal 750 damage after this rest penetration, which means you have a damage increase of 50%. Right? And in contrast, if the enemy has a negative 50 rest, your initial damage of 1500 will only deal 1750, which is a damage increase of 16.67%. So as a result of this, you can see that to a certain extent, you could potentially have diminishing returns if you overstack on rest penetration. But this is not something that players should need to consider with, just because we simply do not have any other alternative rest penetration sources other than Silver Wolf. And then moving on to a talent, increase the speed for the entire team by 10% excluding Ruan Mei, and when an ally breaks the target's weakness, Ruan Mei deals damage equivalent to 120% of her ice damage. A simple 10% permanent speed buff, nothing major to the point where you can replace speed boots, but it is still roughly equivalent to 5 speed subs for 100 base speed units, which can definitely help players hit their next speed threshold. The additional break damage is also applied anytime a break occurs, even if it was not by Ruan Mei. We are definitely going to have some additional damage output regardless of who is going to be breaking the target. Then finally, talking about her technique, Silken Serenade. And for those of you guys who do not want to read all that, to boil it down very simply, it is a very useful technique that can be used anytime before a battle start for free 30 energy recharge and a skill cast. Remember, it's a skill cast, that's why she gets a free 30 energy recharge, which also means that Ruan Mei can cast the ultimate on turn 1 with just a single basic attack and an ER rope, which vastly increase our clear speed and quality of life, especially when it comes to fast MOC clear rotations. As you can see from the map over here, we enter into battle with 65 energy, 5 from our talent, 30 from our free skill cast, as well as 20 from a basic attack. With an additional 19.4% energy regeneration, we can now hit 130.67, which is perfectly the amount needed to cast our ultimate on the very first turn. So very comfortable. The entire essay about the simulated universe portion, it can be summarized into breaking enemies faster regardless of element, making Ruan Mei an extremely powerful simulated universe support regardless of any team comps that we want to use her with. Then moving on into Ruan Mei's traces, her mana traces is going to be 37.3 break effect, 22.5 defense, and 5 speed. All really useful traces that Ruan Mei benefits from. For her second trace, for her first major trace, Inert Respiration, increased break effect by 20% for all allies. Note that this 20% break effect, it is inclusive of Ruan Mei herself. That means at completely no break effect subsets, she will achieve 57.3 break effect. Right? You don't need a single sub and you already have 57.3 break effect. Her second major trace, now this is very important. Days Wane Thoughts Wax. Ruan Mei regenerates 5 energy at the start of a turn, which is exactly the same as Ting Yun's trace. Very important for Ruan Mei's energy threshold calculations, which we'll be diving a little bit further later. But perhaps the most important trace of them all is going to be Candle Lights on Still Waters, which for every 10% of Ruan Mei's break effect that exceeds 120%, her skill will increase allies damage by 6% up to a maximum of 36%. So assuming a player have a level 10 Ruan Mei skill, that is gonna be 32 plus 36% additional damage percentage, which is equivalent to a 68% damage buff for our entire team with Ruan Mei's skill. Now, to achieve the full benefit of this, it caps out at 180% break effect, which means players needs to stack on an additional 123 break effect or a whopping 20 break effect substats without any additional sources from Lightcones or Relic sets. Now, keep in mind that not achieving the maximum effect is not a very big loss, as a single stack is equivalent to 6% damage boost, and this single 6% damage boost is really not that important as compared to ensuring that our Ruan Mei is faster than our DPS in a practical situation, because we always want to cast our skill before our DPS goes. Similar to how Bronya's crit damage or Silei's 160 speed scaling works, we have excellent benefits even without hitting the maximum threshold. Then moving on to a helpful tip, number 1 is that Ruan Mei is still an excellent hypercarry support. Now, while Ruan Mei's usage is still best given to a duo DPS setup, since we have no other supports that matches up as close to Ruan Mei in a DPS setup, right? Opportunity cost. However, Ruan Mei is still perfectly viable and in fact extremely strong as a hypercarry support. Speed buff, damage percentage buff, res penetration, and break efficiency, they are all really powerful and beneficial, not just to any hypercarry, to any DPS period. Now, second thing, knowing when to use Ruan Mei's ultimate. Now, due to Ruan Mei's ultimate duration lasting only 2 turns and the counter goes down on Ruan Mei's turn herself, players should hold off on using Ruan Mei's ultimate right before our DPS turn to ensure maximum ultimate uptime value, right? right? You do not want to use Ruan Mei's turn the moment it's up, because if you do that, and in case our DPS gets crowd control or the DPS turn is not even there, then you definitely lose a lot of value there. Missing even a single turn on this ultimate for our DPS is a big window of opportunity that players could have otherwise made use of. In relation to this, some CM players have also theorized a slow Ruan Mei build, intentionally dropping Ruan Mei's speed to 120 in order to trigger Von Weg and ensure that we still act first with our slow Ruan Mei, but after our very first turn, Ruan Mei's ultimate and skill would theoretically last a longer time relative to our faster DPS speed. Now in theory, this would function like a slow Luocha or slow Fu Xuan field to prolong the field duration at the expense of a slower skill point economy as well as just slower ultimate rotations in general, since your character is moving slower. Further testing for this specific setup would be required. And finally, Ruan Mei prefers on-element, high toughness damage teammates. In order to make full use of Ruan Mei's weakness break kit, having teammates that match the right element against the target is very important. So this is inclusive of our supports and sustains who will be using their damaging abilities like basic attacks or ultimates, right? And as such, Silver Wolf's weakness implant together with Mono Quantum team, that is Fu Xuan plus Sile or QQ, is an exceptionally synergistic team despite not being a duo DPS comp. Now moving on to Ruan Mei's Eidolons. Her Eidolon 1, I think by now we should all know, this is by far the strongest E1 support E1 in honkaistarrail, if not the strongest E1 across every single limited battle unit we have seen so far. I've mentioned numerous times in my channel the power of stacking defense percentage reduction due to its exponential scaling effect, so I won't repeat this here any further. Having our defense to stack up as close to 100% defense reduction as possible will give us the highest damage multiplier increase across any damage multipliers, right? So super good. Now Ruan Mei's Eidolon 2 is a 40% attack buff when dealing damage to enemies with weakness break. At 40% attack buff, it balances out Ruan Mei's extremely high damage percentage buffs, which makes her buffs a little bit more balanced and less overweighted on damage percentage. But that being said, this is only for enemies with weakness break, right? If it is not weakness broken, then this at 40% attack buff, it does not exist. And the attack percentage buff itself, it is just not as impactful compared to defense reduction or res penetration. It is good to have, but it is not super important to have. Now moving on to Ruan Mei's Eidolon 4, when an enemy's weakness is broken, Ruan Mei's break effect increased by 100% for 3 turns. This is an extremely high break effect buff that lasts for a very long time, and it is inclusive of adding into the stat required to hit your 180% break effect, right? So something to consider. Likely this is also long enough to have a pretty much permanent uptime with multiple targets, right? The break effect itself, it doesn't offer the team any further benefits beyond the 180% for the damage percentage. It does improve Ruan Mei's personal damage upon additional breaks, which can still be very substantial, especially if you unlock Ruan Mei's Eidolon 6, which is extending the duration of the ultimate field by 1 turn and the break damage multiplier increased by 200%. Similar to Kafka's E6, any Eidolon that increase a damage multiplier, not damage percentage, damage multiplier, is always gonna give a massive increase in final damage output. Unlocking her Eidolon 6 essentially unlocks a more or less permanent ultimate field uptime, which is probably the most impactful Eidolon, second to Eidolon 1. On top of that, Ruan Mei's break damage can now also reach extremely high numbers to the point where she can pretty much just be a sub DPS from simply existing. So in summary, Ruan Mei's Eidolon 1 is extremely useful, far more than the signature Lightcone, which we'll be explaining later on, but Ruan Mei at E0 is still perfectly viable for every single endgame content we have. E6 will create an almost 100% field uptime, assuming a 3-turn ultimate is achieved consistently, although this could be a slight overkill because most DPS do not need 100% buffed uptime, nor is that content difficult enough to warrant for a very high Ruan Mei damage output, right? So that is that for her Eidolon benefits. And moving on to her energy thresholds, Ruan Mei's rotation is extremely similar to Ting Yun's rotations, as both of them share the same talent, which is regenerating 5 energy at the start of the turn, as well as having a similar rotation of casting out skill once and basic twice. For the player base, we should be aiming for a 3-turn ultimate for Ruan Mei, because Ruan Mei must cast a skill by the 3rd turn, similar to Fu Xuan. So failure to achieve a 3-turn ultimate, not only is this bad for her 2-turn ultimate uptime, it is also bad for her skill point economy as well as just general rotations on her kit as a whole, right? So taking a look over here, Ruan Mei can cast her out at the very first turn with just a basic attack after using a technique, right? You just need to use a ER rope, basic attack, no Von Weg, no nothing, no memories of the past. You can cast the ultimate on the very first turn. So something for players to consider, right? Okay, so going to the actual rotation itself, there's 3 key rotations to go over. The most damage potential, the most consistent, and so as the middle of both damage and consistency, right? So the first of all, let's go through the most damage potential, which is Ruan Mei equipping herself with the signature Lightcone. If Ruan Mei were to equip a signature Lightcone, she actually does not need to run Penacony or Von Weg, right? You can still maintain a 3-turn ultimate as long as you get hit once. Because we are going to be assuming that Ruan Mei will be getting hit once, whether we run Penacony or Von Weg here, it does not change the fact at all, right? You're still going to achieve a 3-turn ultimate with or without this 5%. That's why we can actually drop this for Fleetless or Kill for an even higher damage increase. So after this rotation, we'll be left with 131.34 energy with 1 hit and 1 new wave, since our signature Lightcone gives us 10 energy, right? So this has the most damage potential, because after factoring in our turn 1 ultimate using ER rope alone, Ruan Mei only needs 1 hit. Between the next 3 turns, she needs to get hit once in order to cast a 3-turn ultimate. Also, we are assuming that Ruan Mei does not need to cast her ultimate again before the second wave, right? Because the next 10 energy, it comes from starting a fresh wave of enemies. So we are assuming that Ruan Mei is going to be casting her ultimate just once per wave, which usually is more than enough to just defeat the entire enemy, right? So this is the highest damage potential, assuming that we get hit. But for players who want a little bit more consistency in their life, you don't really care about the damage, you just want to have a very chill life, then Memories of the Past / Cogger's S5 is going to be your next best bet. But with this setup, you do need Penacony / Von Weg in order to ensure a 131.86 energy, a perfect 3-turn ultimate with no external sources, right? With all these setup together combined, 131.86, right? Super stable, super consistent. But if you guys want it in middle of the road, that is going to be with Bronya's signature Lightcone. It is going to give us 134.4 energy, 3-turn ultimate, but you do need to get hit once. You don't get any energy from starting a new wave, but you just need to get hit once over 3 turns, right? You're gonna get 134.4 energy. Middle of the road between damage and fluidity, since Bronya's Lightcone still gives us a little bit of damage percentage from our DPS after Ruan Mei's turn, as well as the additional skill point. However, we cannot drop a Von Weg / Penacony, because dropping this will result in 129.4 energy, which is literally just 0.6 energy away. So it is a little bit annoying, unless players have a higher Bronya Super Inversion Lightcone. Then for that, if you guys have that, then you can actually drop Penacony and Von Weg for Fleetless or Q. So in summary, 3-turn ultimate is going to be our main objective for any Ruan Mei setup. But 3-turn ultimate can only be guaranteed, right? Guaranteed with Memories of the Past / Cogger's S5 with no external energy sources. But the moment our Ruan Mei gets hit even once, then Bronya S1 and her own signature Lightcone S1 will offer more utility in terms of skill points and damage increase. External sources like Huo's energy battery also is another great way to ensure a 3-turn ultimate without Memories of the Past or getting hit. So as such, players should choose the Lightcone based on their comfort with RNG rotations affecting Ruan Mei's energy threshold. And that is that. Now moving on to Ruan Mei's relics, that is honestly not very difficult to understand. First of all, it's going to be a 4-piece Thief set. Now Thief is going to be the best choice for players struggling to achieve a high break effect with Ruan Mei. So using 180% as the limit, players will still need roughly 20 break effect substats after the 57.3% from a Tracer's. 4-piece Thief set over here basically saves a player roughly 5 subsets worth of break effect, which allows for more freedom to allocate into speed or durability. But that being said, this is not Ruan Mei's best slot, since Ruan Mei cannot fully make use of T's 4-piece effect. Ruan Mei will rarely be the one breaking the enemy, and as such, the additional 3 energy will not be applied to Ruan Mei. And even if it does apply to Ruan Mei, this additional 3 energy wouldn't make a massive difference in our energy threshold. It essentially is the difference between do we run Penacony or do we run Broken Kill, right? So that's what Thief said. But for players with sufficient break effect subs, then consider running a 4-piece hacker space. A 4-piece hacker space effect, it can be activated with Ruan Mei's ultimate, and the 2-piece speed is always welcome to ensure Ruan Mei always goes first before DPS in actual combat. And as such, if players can hit 180% break effect while on 4-piece hacker space, then this would be Ruan Mei's ideal set due to the added utility, especially from the speed buff from using Ruan Mei's ultimate. One special mention is going to be a 4-piece passerby for very specific try-hard fast MOC cycle setups, right? You really need the additional skill point, then consider running a 4-piece hacker space, right? And then for Ruan Mei's planetary sets, honestly a lot of options, but also not a lot of options, you can put it that way, right? So for players who need the 5% energy regen using her signature Lightcone, you pretty much need this 5%, so you can get it from either Von Weg or Penacony. Von Weg is better for general purpose as it ensures Ruan Mei always goes first in battle, which is very important in order to ensure that our skill is before our DPS. Penacony, it should be reserved for IDPS units like Jingliu, Yanqing, and Herta. But for players with signature Lightcone, like I mentioned, energy threshold, you can opt for Fleetless or Kill just to improve our entire team's damage a little bit higher. Fleetless for DOT, Kill for crit DPS. Keep in mind, Ruan Mei has no effect rest traces as well as no other sources of effect rest, and it's with the added requirement of stacking very high break effect, speed, and durability, the achieving 30 effect rest on Broken Kill might be a little bit challenging. Moving on to her main and substats, very straightforward for Ruan Mei. We are going to be sticking to the classic support setup with the emphasis on durability, speed, and energy regeneration. Break effect rope on Ruan Mei, it is not recommended due to heavily reducing our ultimate uptime to 4 turns even with Memory of the Past / Coggers, which means getting break effect from substats or even relic sets would be much more ideal. We really want Ruan Mei to maintain a 3-turn ultimate. So aiming for the 180% break effect is going to be the goal, but missing say 10, 20 or even 30% break effect from 180, but if we can still achieve a higher speed than the DPS, then that is going to be worth it. It is much more important to be fast enough going before DPS than aiming for 180% break effect, right? So you can see over here, chest and sphere, they're both the same, HP or defense, speed boots, ER rope, high subset priority for 180% break effect, following which you can go for speed, medium for HP and defense, and then low is going to be effect rest, or you can apply effect rest a little bit higher if you're going to be running Broken Kill. Then moving on to Lightcones, best in slot is definitely going to be the Pass Self and the Mirrors. It covers basically everything that Ruan Mei needs and offers a lot more utility than any of the other Lightcones, right? Especially useful in pure fiction or any multi-wave content with its team-wide energy buff. But the only downside is the potential inconsistency when it comes to casting a 3-turn ultimate. So players can mitigate this by external energy sources such as getting hit, such as using Huo, or even potential future energy mechanics that we have not yet discovered. But generally speaking, this is going to be her best in slot. For players who want a consistent 3-turn ultimate, you don't really care for the additional damage, you don't really want to rely on external factors, then S5, Memories of the Past or Coggers is going to be your next best choice. Memories of the Past S5 is a lot more favorable compared to Coggers due to the additional break effect that Memories of the Past have, as well as the additional HP, defense, and attack, right? So the only issue is just it can be a little bit difficult to obtain an S5 Memories of the Past, and S5 is an absolute must. You must have an S5, otherwise you cannot achieve a 3-turn ultimate without getting hit, right? So if you don't have S5 Memory of the Past, then S5 Coggers can be an excellent substitute until you accomplish S5 Memories of the Past, right? And another alternative, S1 Bronya, it offers more utility than Memories of the Past or Coggers with the damage percentage and skill points, but the energy regeneration is not significant enough to guarantee a 3-turn ultimate. So we still need to rely on external sources like getting hit with Bronya Lightcone. So something to consider. And then one last pick is going to be S5 Duns. Now this is a potential niche pick. Ruan Mei can out on the very first turn after using her technique, which gives us a free skill as well as a basic attack. So use this with your own testing. In summary, Ruan Mei's Lightcone decision is mainly tied to her energy thresholds as explained earlier. So it really depends if a player prefers to have a higher damage ceiling with a possibility of not getting a 3-turn ultimate or a more consistent 3-turn ultimate regardless of the RNG, right? So that is going to be that for a signature Lightcone. And finally, when it comes to team compositions, in summary, Ruan Mei performs the best in a duo DPS setup. I think we have established that since day one, but she still excels really well in a hypercarry setup. She is not a substitute to current powerhouses like Bronya and Tingyun, but they can definitely be used together, although the value for Ruan Mei shines much more in duo DPS. Remember guys, it's always about opportunity cost. How much additional damage can both of your teams do after adding Ruan Mei to either of Team A or Team B, right? So to set up a little comparison, below are some of the supports that Ruan Mei could potentially power creep, namely Asta, Pela, and potentially Silverwolf. Asta, she's the easiest to power creep because the biggest benefit for Asta is the team-wide 50 speed. There's very little situations where we really need that 200 speed, so that's out of the window. DPS, we don't really need Asta speed if you just exchange to speed boots alongside with Ruan Mei's speed buff. So at the end of the day, Ruan Mei's kit just far outperforms Asta's kit. For Pela, a standalone 40% defense down with 12 eyes res penetration is roughly 42% final damage increase, while Ruan Mei's 25% res penetration and 68% damage buff will far supersede Pela. However, this may change if a target has a higher defense down sources due to defense down's exponential increase, right? Especially if you do not have E1 Ruan Mei, something to consider, right? And lastly, Silverwolf, very close to Ruan Mei. In fact, it is the hardest support to lose value, but for Silverwolf, the biggest weakness will come when weakness implant is no longer as popular when our players' unit library expands, right? If you do not need Silverwolf's weakness implant, then really she is basically a single target debuffer that applies defense threat, right? And also, Silverwolf's single target scenario is just not doing her a lot of favors, especially in multi-target heavy content so far. And then for some sample teams, you can take a look over here. We basically have some potential duo DPS team comps, main targets being DOT and follow-up team comps. For DOT, we have Kafka plus any of the 4 DOT elements, right? Fire from Gwen Iphone, physical from Luca, wind from Sampo, and lightning from potentially Servo, right? In the future, Black Swan when she comes out. Another follow-up team comp, it could be Topaz plus either Jingyuan, Clara, or Dr. Ratio, right? For this, in between these 3 teams, I would say that for Ratio and Jingyuan, they far outperform Clara, because if an enemy is weakness broken for Clara, it means that they are not attacking, which is counterintuitive for Clara's kit, right? So that's why this particular setup is not gonna perform as well as Jingyuan and Dr. Ratio. And lastly, for some hyper carry setup, because at the end of the day, let's be real, most players playing honkaistarrail, they still are invested in the hyper carry team comp as compared to a duo DPS, right? And you'll be glad to know that she still performs really well with hypercarry. All hypercarries, they gain massive damage increase from Ruan Mei as well as Bronya's skill and existence. And with that, we have come to the end of this week's episode of CN Unit Analysis. So let me know what you guys' thoughts are in the comments down below. And if you guys would like to engage in further discussions, head on over to Pokke's village, where we have a very active community talking about honkaistarrail on a daily basis. If you guys would like to check out my stream, as of the time of this recording, I should be streaming right now. I'm probably doing $10,000 worth of Ruan Mei pulls for my viewers, multiple E6 S5 accounts. If you're interested, I'll catch you guys there. Otherwise, all the best for Ruan Mei pulls, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys. Did I say how I genuinely cannot believe this shit? I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys.